In the village of Ekiti, where the red earth met the lush greenery of the bush, and where life flowed slowly like the river at the foot of the hills, there lived a girl named Adebisi. She was a quiet one, always keeping to herself, her mind often lost in thoughts of her dreams, which seemed far removed from the life around her. Adebisi's family was not rich, but they were known for their hard work and integrity. Her father, Baba Olamide, was a skilled blacksmith, and her mother, Aya Olamide, ran a small local eatery that served the best pounded yam in the village. The family lived in a modest mud hut, yet their hearts were full, especially Adebisi's. Her dream was to leave Ekiti and pursue an education at the prestigious school in the nearby town of Ibadan. It wasn't an easy dream to have. There were few girls who attended school past the age of 12 in Ekiti. Most of the girls worked in the farms, helping their mothers cook and clean, while the boys were sent to school. But Adebisi was different. Her thirst for knowledge burned brightly, and she would often sit under the big baobab tree in their yard, reading any book she could get her hands on, even though the pages of the old, worn-out books from the local library smelled of dust and age. They felt like treasures to her. One day, while Adebisi was in the market with her mother, word spread like wildfire through the village. There was a scholarship program for girls to attend the best school in Ibadan. The scholarship was being offered by Madam Omolara, the wife of a wealthy politician who had decided to help the girls of Ekiti receive a good education. Madam Omolara had come to visit the village the previous year, and since then she'd been working on this initiative. It was a rare opportunity, one that Adebisi never thought could be hers. Did you hear? Madam Omolara is offering a scholarship to only 2 girls from Ekiti. Can you imagine? I heard they will pay for everything. The school fees, the uniforms, the books, everything, Aya Olamide said excitedly, her eyes lighting up as she spoke. Adebisi's heart began to race. Could this be the opportunity she had been waiting for? Mama, do you think I could apply? She asked softly, her voice almost trembling with hope. Iya Olamide looked down at her daughter and saw the earnestness in her eyes. She had always known Adebisi had big dreams, but she wasn't sure if those dreams were meant to be fulfilled in a place like Ekiti. After all, girls from their village rarely left. But something in her mother's heart stirred, and she looked at Adebisi with a deep, knowing smile. "You have worked hard, Adebisi," she said, "and you've shown that you're different from the others. Go ahead and apply. Maybe, just maybe, this is your time." That evening, under the flickering light of a lantern, Adebisi filled out the application form. It was a simple form, but for her, it felt like a life-changing decision. She wrote about her love for reading, her dreams of becoming a teacher, and the reason she believed she deserved this opportunity. She could feel her mother's proud gaze on her as she completed the form. The next morning, Adebisi handed the form to the village head, who was also a trusted friend of Madam Omolara. He promised to deliver it personally to her. The days that followed were filled with anxious anticipation. Would she be chosen? Would her humble background stand in the way of her dreams? As Adebisi walked to the village square one afternoon to fetch water, she was caught by surprise when the village head called her name. He was holding an envelope in his hands, a broad smile on his face. "Adebisi, my dear, you've been chosen," he said, his voice filled with pride. "You are one of the 2 girls who will receive the scholarship." Adebisi's heart skipped a beat, and for a moment she stood frozen. She had been chosen. Her dream was coming true. The people around her began to congratulate her, and for the first time, she felt a rush of excitement. She looked at her mother, who was standing nearby, with a huge smile on her face, and Adebisi knew in that moment that nothing was impossible. She had taken the first step toward a future she had once only dreamed of. But little did Adebisi know, the road ahead would not be as simple as she had hoped. The scholarship to Ibadan would open doors to a life she never expected, and in the process, she would come to face the harsh realities of friendships, loyalty, and temptation. Adebisi's heart was light as she walked back to her hut with the good news. Her thoughts swirled around the possibilities that lay ahead in Ibadan. She could already picture herself in a proper school, sitting at a desk, surrounded by books and teachers who would help her chase her dreams. But even in her excitement, she couldn't ignore the worries that began to creep in. As soon as she entered the hut, she saw her father, Baba Olamide, sitting by the fire. His face was weathered from years of working with metal, but his eyes always sparkled with wisdom. Iya Olamide was preparing dinner, the aroma of steaming yam and vegetable soup filling the air. "Papa, I have something to tell you," Adebisi said, her voice barely above a whisper. He looked up at her with a knowing gaze. "What is it, my daughter? Why do you look so happy?" "I've been chosen for the scholarship to Ibadan." Adebisi's voice broke with excitement. "I can go to school. Mama and we can leave Ekiti and I can become a teacher." The room went quiet for a moment as Baba Olamide absorbed the news. His face softened, but there was something in his eyes, a cautiousness that Adebisi hadn't expected. "That's good, my daughter," he finally said. "But remember, the road to Ibadan is not easy. The people there are not like us. Their ways are different. You must remember where you come from, Adebisi, and not let the world change you." Adebisi nodded, but her heart was already racing ahead, filled with thoughts of new experiences and a life that felt far beyond Ekiti. She had never imagined that one day she would be leaving this simple village behind, but now that possibility was within her reach. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Adebisi packed the few clothes she owned and said goodbye to the village. Her mother, Iya Olamide, spent hours teaching her about the customs of the city, cautioning her to be careful and not to forget the lessons she had learned in Ekiti. Adebisi's friends, the other girls in the village, didn't understand her excitement. They could not fathom why Adebisi wanted to leave the familiarity of Ekiti for an unknown life in the big city. "You're going to lose yourself in Ibadan," they warned. "What's wrong with our village? You'll change, Adebisi, and not for the better. You'll become like those rich girls who think they're better than everyone else." But Adebisi was undeterred. She knew what she wanted. She had dreams of becoming a teacher, of helping other children like herself, and giving them the opportunities she never had. The day came when she boarded the bus to Ibadan with her family's blessings, her heart full of hope and fear. Baba Olamide held her hand before she stepped onto the bus and gave her one last piece of advice. "Be strong, Adebisi, and no matter what happens, stay true to yourself. The city will try to change you, but remember, you are the daughter of Ekiti. That is your strength." With those words in her heart, Adebisi waved goodbye to the only home she had ever known. The journey to Ibadan was long and tiring, but Adebisi barely noticed. Her thoughts were elsewhere, imagining the new life that awaited her. When Adebisi finally arrived in Ibadan, the city greeted her with a loud, bustling energy she had never experienced before. The The sounds of honking cars, the shouts of street vendors, and the smell of street food filled the air. The streets were crowded, the buildings towering, and the people were moving fast, much faster than anything Adebisi had ever seen in Ekiti. She had been to the city once before, but only for short visits. This was different. She was here to stay. She followed the directions she had been given to the boarding house where the scholarship students stayed. Her heart raced as she walked through the streets, unsure of herself, but determined to make it. At the boarding house, Adebisi was met by Madam Adebimpe, a strict but kind-hearted woman who managed the house. She showed Adebisi to her small room, a space that was simple but better than anything she had known. It had a small bed, a desk, and a window that looked out onto the busy streets of Ibadan. Adebisi felt both overwhelmed and amazed by how different everything was. The next morning, she woke up early to prepare for her first day at school. She put on the only uniform she had, a neatly pressed dress that she had sewn herself with the help of Iya Olamide. Her shoes were worn, but she didn't mind. She knew she was there to learn, not to impress anyone. At the school, Adebisi was struck by how different it was from Ekiti. The school building was large and impressive, with shiny floors and classrooms that smelled of new books and chalk. The teachers were professional and the students were well-dressed, all with their heads held high. It felt like a world away from the simple life she had left behind. As Adebisi walked through the corridors of the school, she noticed the other students. Many of them were children of wealthy families from Ibadan and beyond. They wore expensive clothes, carried branded bags, and spoke English with a fluency that made Adebisi feel small. She felt out of place, unsure of how to navigate the world she had just entered. During the first break, Adebisi sat alone under a tree, watching the other students laugh and chat in groups. Some of them glanced at her, but no one came to speak with her. She felt the weight of loneliness settle on her shoulders. It wasn't long before she met a girl named Tolu. Tolu was from a well-to-do family in Ibadan, but she wasn't like the other students. She was kind and approached Adebisi with a warm smile. "You're Adebisi, right?" Tolu asked. "I saw you in class today. You're new, aren't you?" Adebisi nodded, her heart lifting at the kindness in Tolu's voice. "Yes, I'm new. I'm from Ekiti," she replied shyly. Tolu's smile widened. "I can tell. You don't seem like the other girls. But don't worry, you'll fit in just fine here. I'll show you around and introduce you to some people." For the first time since arriving in Ibadan, Adebisi felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe things wouldn't be so hard. Maybe she could make friends after all. Over the next few weeks, Tolu helped Adebisi adjust to her new life. She introduced her to other students and showed her the ropes. Adebisi was grateful, but as much as Tolu was kind, there was something about her that made Adebisi uneasy. Tolu had a certain confidence, a way of moving through the world that seemed so effortless. She was popular, well-liked, and always surrounded by friends. One afternoon, as they sat under a tree during lunch break, Tolu leaned in and whispered, "Adebisi, I know it's hard for you, but you have to understand something. This school is not just about learning. It's about connections, about who you know and how you present yourself. You can't just be quiet and blend in. You have to stand out." Adebisi frowned, not quite understanding. "But I just want to study. I want to become a teacher, to help other children." Tolu laughed, a soft, almost sad sound. "I know, but to get there, you need more than just studying. You need influence. You need the right connections. You'll see what I mean soon enough." Adebisi didn't know what Tolu meant, but she felt a growing unease. She had come to Ibadan to learn, not to play games. But as the days went by, she saw more and more of what Tolu had warned her about. The popular students didn't just excel in their studies, they also knew the right people, dressed the right way, and were constantly surrounded by wealth and luxury. One Friday afternoon, Adebisi was walking back to her room when she overheard a conversation between some of the girls from her class. They were discussing the weekend's plans, and Adebisi realized they were talking about a party. "Adebisi, you should come with us this weekend," one of the girls, Kemi, said with a smile when she saw Adebisi walking by. "It's going to be fun. You'll get to meet some of the important people in Ibadan." Adebisi hesitated. She wasn't sure about these girls. They seemed too different from her, too focused on appearances. That evening, as Adebisi sat on her small bed, the sounds of the city began to fade, and she found herself thinking about the party Kemi had invited her to. The idea of being part of the popular group seemed appealing, but a small voice inside her reminded her of her mother's words. "Do not forget where you come from. Education is the key, Adebisi. Let nothing distract you from your goals." She sighed, staring out of her window at the city lights. Ibadan was a beautiful, chaotic place, and as much as it intimidated her, it was also exciting. The people here seemed to have so much confidence, so much wealth, so much power. Adebisi often felt like an outsider, but this invitation from Kemi, though tempting, made her wonder if she could ever truly fit in. She wasn't sure what kind of world she was walking into, but she didn't want to lose herself in the process. The weekend came, and the girls were excited about the party. Adebisi didn't feel the usual rush of excitement. Instead, she felt a sense of unease that she couldn't quite shake. Tolu and Kemi came by her room to pick her up. Both girls were dressed in flashy clothes that Adebisi could never afford. They wore expensive perfumes, and their nails were perfectly manicured. Adebisi looked down at her own clothes, simple and clean, but far from fashionable, and felt the stark contrast. "You're going to have fun tonight, Adebisi. You'll see," Tolu said with a bright smile as she adjusted Adebisi's hair. "This is the life you need to get used to if you want to survive here." Adebisi nodded, but a part of her hesitated. She hadn't come to Ibadan to become like them, but she also didn't want to be left out. So, she followed them out the door. They took a taxi to a part of Ibadan Adebisi had never seen before. It was a wealthy neighborhood with large gated houses and pristine streets. The house they arrived at was magnificent. It was decorated with colorful lights, and music spilled out from the open doors, mingling with the chatter of excited students. Inside, the party was already in full swing. Adebisi stood at the entrance, overwhelmed by the sight before her. The room was filled with students from her school, all laughing, drinking, and dancing to loud music. There were people in expensive clothes, holding glasses of wine, and there was a long table covered with food and drinks. The whole atmosphere felt like something out of a dream, and Adebisi couldn't help but feel small. Tolu, ever the social butterfly, immediately blended into the crowd, chatting with anyone and everyone. Kemi, on the other hand, introduced Adebisi to a few of her friends, who seemed polite but distant. Adebisi could tell they weren't particularly interested in getting to know her, and the more she observed, the more she realized how superficial everything seemed. As the night went on, Adebisi grew uncomfortable. The students around her seemed to be less focused on their studies and more focused on impressing one another, showing off their wealth, and being seen in the right places. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was out of place. Then, just as she was about to slip away, to a quieter part of the house, a young man came up to her. He was tall, with neatly combed hair, and wore a designer shirt that probably cost more than Adebisi's entire wardrobe. "Hey there, you're Adebisi, right?" he asked, his voice smooth and confident. "I've seen you around the school. You're from Ekiti, right?" Adebisi nodded, unsure of how to respond. She was not used to being the center of attention, especially from someone so handsome and well-dressed. "I'm Olamide," he continued, flashing a smile. "It's nice to meet you. You're looking good tonight." Adebisi felt her face flush. She was taken aback by his attention. It wasn't that she didn't like the compliment, but it felt so foreign to her. It was hard to believe he even noticed her, a girl from a small village who was just trying to make her way through life. "Thank you," Adebisi replied softly, trying to smile. Olamide leaned closer, his voice lowering as if he was sharing a secret. "You know, you're different from the others. I like that about you. Most of the girls here are just trying too hard. But you're real." Adebisi didn't know how to respond. She had never thought of herself as anything special. She was just a simple girl, trying to get an education and make her mother proud. Olamide took a step back, his eyes scanning the room. "Tell you what, I'll make sure you get a drink. Come with me." Before Adebisi could protest, he led her to the bar, where a man in a white suit poured them drinks. She took the glass hesitantly, unsure of what she had gotten herself into. But Olamide's presence was commanding, and she felt drawn to him in a way she couldn't explain. As they sat together, he told her stories about his life in Ibadan, about his wealthy parents, and the privileges he had enjoyed all his life.